Welcome back to another episode of Positive Solutions for Life. I'm your host, Peggy Meyer. Let me ask you something. Have you ever decided to do something that you know is good for you? And you start strong, you're motivated, you're committed, and then suddenly something inside you pushes back. You begin negotiating with yourself. Well, maybe just this little won't hurt. It's not that big of a deal. I'll start again tomorrow. If you've ever experienced that tug of war inside your own mind, you're not alone. Because today we're talking about something we all experience, resistance. And oh my goodness, has the resistance been showing up big time in my life lately, especially when it comes to sugar. So let me tell you what's been happening. Back in January, after the holidays, I decided it would be a great time to reset, clean things up a bit. So I started Christine Trump's 21-day sugar detox. The first week, I did great. I was focused, I was motivated, I was feeling so proud of myself once again, because you know what? Hey, I was rocking this. And then week two came. And I started to wane a little, started questioning myself. But you know what? I got back on track, and before I knew it, the 21 days were over. But during that, Christine talked about Wendy Speak's 40-day sugar fast, which many people do at the beginning of the year or even during Lent. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds perfect. I could do that during Lent. It's not only a time to reset physically, but also spiritually, a way to turn more intentionally toward God, right? To feast on God's word instead of sugar, like Wendy says. I thought I could just, continue without sugar during this, short time between the ending of the 21 detox and Lent. But then that's where resistance started creeping in. Instead of continuing without sugar after the detox, my brain had a different plan. It said, well, Lent hasn't started yet. It's not going to start for another few weeks. So it's okay to have a little sugar right now. Those thoughts. A little won't hurt. What's wrong with fruit? It's natural sugar. God made it, it's basically a holy fruit food, right? And before I knew it, sugar had quietly made its way back into my daily routine. And then let's start it. And I made the commitment. No sugar, no sweet things, even fruit. Week one, rocked it. Yes, I did it. I did great again. But then week two, resistance showed up once again. Suddenly, my mind started questioning everything. Do I really need to quit sugar? I mean, really? I mean, I really wanted to connect with God. So, do I have to give up sugar? I mean, what's wrong with fruit? I mean, God made it, right? It's whole food, one ingredient. An apple won't hurt. And the moment I allowed that apple in, it opened the gate. Suddenly, I wanted more sweet things. And before long in that week, too, I found myself standing in the kitchen, eating cookies and chocolate chips. And then I realized I had rationalized the same way Eve did in the Bible. Eve was tempted by an apple, rationalized that it was good to eat, and look how that turned out. Same with me. So, why do I resist what I know is good for me? Do you do the same? Do you resist what you know is good for you? Why can I only hold out for about a week before resistance wins? Well, maybe you can relate. Maybe it's not sugar, maybe it's exercise or having a hard conversation or stepping into leadership or trying something new or just being vulnerable. My guess is there's something right now in your life that you have been resisting. What is it? And you know what I've found about resistance? It's actually very natural. Obviously, it started in the Bible with Eve. So let's break this down a little bit. What is resistance? At its simplest form, resistance is the act of pushing back against something. It's that internal voice or that force that says, I don't want to. I'm not ready. This feels a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, it won't matter, really. I mean, it's really good for me, right? It won't hurt, just a little. Won't hurt, right? Well, Resistance is that internal pushback, right? When you feel like you're moving towards something meaningful. Hey, putting sugar is good for you, right? It's healthy. Especially, you know, when you're working towards something that involves growth, change, vulnerability, or obedience. And what's tricky is that resistance rarely announces itself like, hey, I'm resistance here. No, it really sounds like reason, logic, self-protection. Resistance often shows up right when we're about to grow, right when we're about to change, right when we're stepping into something new. And it often means we're standing right on the edge of growth. And that can be uncomfortable. Resistance tends to rise in proportion to the importance. So, what that means is the more important it is, the more it matters, the more likely resistance will show up. I can do good for a week and then resistance goes, well, then I'm on my way to a breakthrough. And resistance steps in. But why does our brain resist it? Why does our brain resist change? Well, there's actually a biological reason for this because our brains are wired for safety, routine, and certainty. We want to be comfortable, we want to know what's going on, and we want it to be repeated. And anything new requires more energy. And new habits mean we got to like rewire our brain. It requires new neural pathways to start. And the brain really doesn't like to spend extra energy if it really doesn't have to. So when we try to change something like quitting sugar, starting a new habit, or stepping outside our comfort zones, the brain starts to send warning signals. Hello, it says, this is uncomfortable. It might be risky. Let's go back to something safe, what we know. But resistance often comes from things like fear of the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. What if we fail? A fear of failure. What if it doesn't work out? But it also could be the fear of success. What if it does work out? Then what? What's going to change? What's going to happen? It can be a loss of control and breaking up of a routine and a habit that we're just so used to. But here's a powerful insight. People don't resist change. They resist being changed. Yeah. They don't want to change inside. They don't want to change on the outside. They resist being changed. We don't like feeling forced to do something. We don't like feeling we're controlled by something else or someone else's, opinion of what we should do. And from a faith perspective, resistance can show up as avoiding what you know God is prompting you to do. Those little nudges, the things that's like, hey, you should do this. God prompting you. It can also show up as delaying obedience, rationalizing disobedience. A little won't hurt, right? Or shrinking back because what he's calling you to do feels so big. You don't know how in the world you could ever do that. And so, what do we do about it? And what can we do about it? A strong starting point is just naming it, being brave and being courageous, and just recognizing resistance is showing up because the moment you say, I'm resisting, you're no longer completely tangled to it, or you're not, have to do it. You've recognized it. I am resisting. It's an awareness. And naming resistance can be you can make it a little humorous, because when you name it in the context of one of our inner personalities, it can kind of like shed a different light on it. So you might recognize a few of these. The toddler, the terrible two personality, the one that throws a tantrum and says, no, I'm not going to do that. No, no, I want to do it my way, right? Toddlers, they're learning, they're growing, and they're showing some independence. And then there's that personality of the rebellious teenager. Oh, yeah, this one shows up for me a lot. My inner teenager says, you don't tell me what to do. No one can tell me what to do. You can't control me. You said I can't have sugar? Yeah, right. I can have it whenever I want. Sound familiar? Yep, same to me. Then we have the comfort seeker personality. Why rock the boat? Things are fine just the way they are. Change? It's too much work. It's overrated. This voice wants the easy path, wants to stay in the comfort zone. And then there's the doubter. This voice whispers, what if you fail? What if you're not good enough? What if it doesn't work? All these personalities, and I'm sure there's more of them, you just let me know which ones you have, but they're all trying to do the same thing. They're trying to protect you from discomfort. But sometimes the very thing we resist is the thing God is inviting us into. Sometimes resistance shows up in the wrong direction. We resist the very things that draw us closer to Him. Silence, stillness, letting go, trusting Him. Yeah. Have you resisted these things before? Yeah. Meanwhile, we often don't resist the things that pull us away from Him, like distractions, comfort, short-term pleasures. In my sugar example, what started out as a physical fast was what was really revealing something deeper. It showed me where I was negotiating, where I was rationalizing, where I was trying to hold on to something instead of letting it go or surrendering it. And that's often where the spiritual work begins, of surrendering what you're resisting to give up. So, what are you resisting? No judgment here. Just notice what is coming up. What are you resisting? Well, what happens if we keep resisting? What is the cost of resistance? Because resistance does have consequences. For one, it takes a lot of energy. Kind of talked about that before. We don't want to expend, our brain doesn't want to expend more energy. And it also creates this friction inside of us. The minds are just different. They're battling each other. We can be emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually all just has a lot of tension and friction within us. It can also lead to a lot of stress, frustration, stagnation, all in the form of low-grade guilt, which sounds a lot like, I should do this, I should do that, I should do this. That kind of soundtrack on repeat. It can also sound like eroded confidence, as delay becomes proof that, you know what, you just don't follow through with anything, do you? I can only stick with something for 1 week. Eroded confidence. It can also show up as numbing cycles where you avoid something and soothe and then regret it and then avoid it again. And, sugar. Okay, I'm gonna avoid sugar and then I get, soothe myself with sugar and then I regret doing that and then I'm gonna avoid it again. You know those cycles. It can also look like relational drift. Hard conversations don't happen, connection doesn't happen, boundaries don't get set, resentment grows. And then there's this disconnect. And also false narratives as we create stories in our heads about why we can't change. Yeah, I can only do it for a week. I have no willpower. It can be, why I'm just too busy. I'm too old. I'm too late, too overwhelmed, too stressed, too frustrated, too emotional, whatever. What are those false stories in our heads that we create on why we can't resist something? But often those stories are just simply ways to stay comfortable or stuck. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine what happens when we stop resisting. We stop resisting what we know is good for us. If we stop letting resistance decide our next action step. What if we stop resisting growth and instead we lean into learning? What happens when we allow ourselves to be beginners and trust that failures and mess ups are not the end, but they're just part of the process? What happens? Growth. Growth happens, learning happens, alignment happens, connection happens. When we stop resisting, we often gain integrity, momentum, clarity, freedom, connection, alignment, because we're moving closer to the life God is calling us towards. So here's the question I want to leave you with today. Where is resistance showing up right now in your life? Is there something you've been avoiding, postponing, or negotiating with yourself about? And if resistance is showing up, instead of fighting it, maybe the better question is, what is resistance trying to reveal? What is it trying to tell me? What is underneath or behind the resistance? Is it fear, control, comfort? Maybe it's an invitation to grow. So if today's conversation made you pause and reflect, that's a good thing. Awareness is often the first step towards change. And remember, resistance doesn't mean something is wrong. Sometimes it just means you're simply standing at the doorway of growth. So thank you for joining me today on Positive Solutions for Life. Until next time, keep listening to that inner nudge, keep growing, and keep looking for positive solutions in your life that will help you transform your mind and body from the inside out.